Ladies, and welcome back to the Advanced Public Finance Management Learning session. The topic is public sector procurement. Today we're going to study the general procurement principles. So by the end of this lesson, you are expected to be able to explain the general procurement principles. That's the lesson objective. Now, candidates, the basic procurement principles are applied in order to achieve sound procurement practice. And it is important to appreciate these basic procurement principles and to apply them in those areas of procurement procedure that demand discretion and judgment if the objectives of sound procurement practice are to be achieved. So the procurement entity, or the procuring entity, the entity that procures, and its staff will be held accountable and responsible for non-compliance with the general procurement principles. All right? So the procurement principles encompass areas like compliance to legal and regulatory framework. In fact, that is one important procurement principle: strict compliance to the legal and regulatory framework. Strict compliance to the legal and regulatory framework. Now, the procuring entity is required to comply to the legal and regulatory framework. In Kenya, we have the procurement law, that is Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act, which public sector entities are required to adhere to when procuring goods, services, and so on. Two, the second general procurement principle is achievement of economy and efficiency. Achievement of economy and efficiency is yet another general procurement principle. This is achievement of economy and efficiency in the delivery of service. When delivering services, then it's important that the services be delivered efficiently. Three, promotion of value for money. Promotion of value for money through effective competition and careful procurement planning. So value for money can be promoted through careful procurement planning and effective competition. D is balancing between control and transaction costs. Now, what do I mean? Now, balancing between the level of control necessary to mitigate risk of loss and the size of transactions, or the size of transaction costs, as it pertains to both direct costs as well as administrative burden and delay. That is a general principle. There is need to balance or balancing. There is need to balance the level of control and transaction costs as it pertains to both the direct costs and also the administrative burden and delay. Separation of authority. Separation of authority between the procurement initiation, vendor selection, commitment, receipt inspection, acceptance of procurement object, and so on. So we know procurement or procuring services or goods is a process. So there ought to be separation of authority or duties at each and every level. At procurement initiation, there ought to be separate authority. At vendor selection or supplier selection, we ought to have different authority or person. At the commitment level, different or separate individuals carrying out the receipt inspection and acceptance of procurement objects and so on. Separation of authority is a very critical procurement principle. 6, management of linkages. Management of linkages. These are linkages of procurement to other areas of PFM. Management of linkages of procurement to other areas of public financial management. That is, by that I mean the promotion of sound public finance management through the appropriate recognition and management of linkages of procurement to other areas of public finance management, such as budget preparation, budget execution, accounts and reporting. Then there is also the scrutiny, external scrutiny. So there ought to be linkages of this procurement to those other areas of public finance management. I've just mentioned the cycle. That is the budget preparation, budget execution. We have the accounts and reporting, and also external scrutiny. That is number 6. Number 7, FG. We are discussing the general procurement principles. Fairness and equity. Equity. Ensuring fairness and equity and avoiding what we call discrimination in the invitation, evaluation, and award of procurement contracts. There ought to be fairness. There should not be instances of favoritism or discrimination at the invitation stage, at the evaluation stage, and also at the award of procurement contract stage. Observance of ethics is yet another general procurement principle. Observance of ethics in all aspects of procurement and ensuring procurement practice is devoid of actual or perceived corruption. Next principle is transparency and accountability. Transparency and accountability. Promotion of transparency and accountability in the whole procurement and disposal process is a general procurement principle. GHIJ. We are moving on to the next point. This is health and safety standards. Promotion of health and safety standards, as well as environmental promotion or protection. Environmental protection is a general procurement principle when dealing with goods, when dealing with the delivery of services, when procuring or when carrying out all the activities or functions of the procurement process. Then there ought to be promotion of health and safety standards so as to promote or protect the environment. Strict adherence to use of appropriate documentation for all the steps of the complete procurement and disposal cycles, and maintaining a comprehensive record of procurement transaction or transactions is a very important general procurement principle. A strict adherence to the appropriate documentation. That means, for example, candidates, if it is maybe tendering, the tendering process, there are specific documents that are to be used in the tendering process. So when applying for tenders, then the appropriate documents, for example, ought to be used in the process of tendering. So strict adherence to the use of appropriate documentation for all the steps of the complete procurement and disposal cycles. The law specifies what documents that ought to be used in the procurement cycle. So the persons involved in procurement ought to strictly adhere to the appropriate documentation. So these are general principles of procurement. Number one, strict compliance to legal and regulatory framework, achievement of economy and efficiency, promotion of value for money, balancing between the level of control and transaction costs, separation of authority at all levels in the cycle, all right? Management of linkages of procurement to other areas of public finance management, like budgeting, budget execution, budget preparation, audit, and reporting, and so on. Linkages. Then fairness and equity, observance of ethics, transparency and accountability, health and safety standards, promotion of health and safety standards, as well as environmental protection, then strict adherence to the appropriate documentation for all the steps of the complete procurement and disposal cycles. So that is the end of the lesson. Remember, when we began, we said that by the end of this lesson, we should be able to outline the general procurement principles. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that will form the basis of today's assignment, where you are now required, without looking at the notes, to outline 10 general procurement principles in the public sector. Without referring to the notes, here's your assignment: outline 10 general procurement principles in the public sector. Thank you for attending the lesson. I'll see you in our next lesson, where we continue to share knowledge in public finance.